All right. Well, welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay out on the West Coast and Eloy Escajedo on the East Coast. And we usually go live on Tuesday, overwhelmingly so, except sometimes we have other things that we have to attend to. And such was the case this week. So, with that said, we're here now and we'll do it. What's going on, Mark?
Oh, just too busy for my own good. Today's a weird day, but making it. It it's
Um,
it, it's a weird day in that I found myself getting into that thing again that I don't like. Woke up at about 2:30 in the morning, couldn't fall back to sleep. Fell back to sleep finally. Woke up at 6:30 in the morning. Wasn't ready to get out of bed. Fell back to sleep about 8, woke up at noon. So it's been a weird day. And I didn't
yeah.
get jack diddly or squat done today.
As the band from England used to say in one of their songs, "You are forgiven." Do you know
Uh,
which song that is?
no,
Forgiven, forgiven, forgiven. You are forgiven. You are forgiven. And I forget the song. It's a do. It's a, what do you call it when songs one follows the other? There's a,
med,
say it.
a medley.
Yeah, there's a medley going on there, and it's two songs. And at the end, they just trash the set. You are forgiven.
That must be the Who.
Well, yeah. Didn't I say the Who at the beginning?
You said you forgot the band.
No, I forgot the. I said from the little band called the Who.
no,
No, I didn't say that.
no, you said the English band.
Okay. Well, in any event, it's from the Who,
Mhm.
and so you and your weirdness of time scheduling
Mhm.
are forgiven because
I'm absolved of my sins.
yeah, because it is it's the human experience,
Hmm.
right? I mean, we want to do a certain thing
Hmm.
that we have in our minds that's this is how it should naturally flow.
Well, I don't know who said it, but the man said, "Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans."
Yep,
So,
that's from that episode from Chico and the Man.
yeah.
It's called Ron Lemon, and
Hmm.
the
Stick out your can. Here come the garbage man. He's no major. I loved
um,
that show growing up. I loved that show.
I didn't know much about that show when I was little because it was something from when I was little, or just
Uh-huh.
prior, or just during, whatever. Um, I I mostly saw the stuff. I don't know why, but that wasn't. If it ever did come up, I never paid attention to it. It's
Uh-huh.
only later with the internet advent that I
Uh-huh.
started to fill in the blanks with certain shows that I would
Hmm.
never have been exposed to, or that I would have been exposed to but never got the chance or never had the focus. And
Hmm.
that's one of them, Chico
Yeah.
and the Man.
Well,
There's a
it was.
song about him.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Jose Feliciano did the theme song to it.
Yeah.
It was. I don't remember what night of the week it was. It was either. I want to say it was Friday or Saturday, but knowing my memory, it could have been Tuesday for all that. Anyway, you had Sanford and Son, then Chico and the Man, and those were the two sitcoms that we watched in that order. And yeah, I loved that show.
Um, I don't want to break from what it doesn't really matter. I'm just creating rules instead
Hmm.
of free flowing like the waves on the ocean.
Free
But I
flowing.
wanna I wanna share this with you. And it just left my mind, just like that. Oh, I remembered it now again. Okay, I ran into a clip,
Uh-huh.
and one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, songs ever written. And this has nothing to do with the theme that I wanted to share this evening
Okay.
to see what you would say, other than it's connected to music. But one of the most powerful songs that have, and there's so many, but something that speaks to me internally deeply is a Paul Simon song called "Still Crazy After All These Years."
Mhm.
Um, Now he wrote that sometime in the '80s at one point, or in the '70s or '80s at some point, maybe
It was
early
in the
'80s,
it was in the 80s, I believe.
early '80s or late '70s, somewhere in that timeline.
It was a
But
good album too.
it's there's some people that are phenomenally magical in there's something poetically deep about some people, and you can throw in some people that do music, and you can throw in people like um Billy Joel. What when did it come out?
1975. I thought it was much later than that.
Okay, so it's much later than that. Okay, so it came out the year I was born. Okay, so that song, Still Crazy After All These Years, a little clip came up on the Facebook scroll along video thing,
Hmm.
and it was him and the Dick Cavett show,
Okay.
which is '70s. I don't know that it kept going in the '80s. I couldn't tell you. The Dick Cavett show would have probably stayed in the '70s. I don't know. Um, I didn't pay much attention to it. I was too little to even know the difference. But in that program clip from Facebook, fingering past the different
Hmm.
videos, um, Paul Simon says, "Well, look, let me show you how. Let me share with you how I construct a song." And Dick Cavett's like, "Oh, well, okay, I like music and such and this and that." He was interviewing Paul Simon, and Paul Simon sings. He says, "Well, look, maybe you can help me because I haven't finished the lyrics yet. I'm stuck at a spot, but let me sing it to you all the way up to the point where I'm stuck." He says, "Okay, cool." And Paul Simon, I can only picture because I've heard the song many, many, many times,
Hmm.
but this is like the first time he's singing it on this show,
Hmm.
and he played it just with him and his acoustic. And dude, the sentiment that has to go, the inside your soul coming out that that has to exist from a person willing to expose what he's saying in a song form is so powerful, and he sang it there, and dude, it's so fantastically awesome, dude. In any event, I think that that song is one of the most powerful songs because he's speaking of lost love,
Hmm.
and then he's speaking of encountering said lost love on the street randomly years later, maybe, and it was casual and nonchalant, the second encounter, to this person that originally meant a great deal, romantically to the protagonist of the song. But in this in this second encounter, as they're walking probably somewhere down one street in New York,
Hmm.
I saw her on the street last night or whatever, and we
Hmm.
talked about some old times and drank ourselves some beers. Still crazy after all these years. That I get chills, and they're multiplying. All I got chills all up just thinking about what that means. You can't get more representational of humanity than that. Americana than that. You can't get it. You can't get more than what that song. I mean, there's more options available, but in any event, those are the things that mean a lot musically. Very powerful.
Have you ever heard of there's a song out another song out there that's kind of similar by Dan Fogelberg called The Same Old Lang Syne.
Say that again.
It's a song by Dan Fogelberg and it's called The Same Old Lang Syne.
Okay.
And it's based on a true story. He bumped into an old girlfriend. He was home for Christmas. He bumped into an old girlfriend at a store and he kind of walked up behind her and startled her, and there was kind of a, oh my god, how you doing, how you been kind of thing. They went out and sat in her car and talked and had a drink together, just sitting there talking. and decided that whatever was there just wasn't there anymore. They both had their own separate lives and everything was great. And they went their separate ways. And that was it. It too is a very powerful song with the same sentiment. That even though you once held a real firm connection, people can go their separate ways, still be civil and nice with one another, but acknowledge that maybe there was something there once, but not anymore.
Yeah,
You
that
know.
essence of loss
Hmm.
with the tag along sentiments of acceptance
Hmm.
or conformity, not in a bad way, but um conformity in the sense of acceptance, let's say. Like, I can accept the terms of what has occurred. That, and yet this essence of blues, of nostalgic
Hmm.
longing for something that's no longer there but's there in a sense, it's all within that world of blues music, let's say.
There's
Or at
also
least
there's also that what if.
there's that what if, what could have been.
Exactly.
These feelings are themes that are human themes that I would dare to say, with not a lot of boldness in it, because I think it's pretty obvious, are human across the scale,
Hmm.
from place to place, worldwide, and therefore understood at some profound level. It's the human experience that keeps going and experiencing similar things across the time. In any event, that song is has that essence and stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
It does.
and huh?
Yeah, it does. I'm with you there.
And Paul Simon, um,
He's
which
one of the masters. He is one of the masters. You mentioned Billy Joel. He's also one of the masters of not only conveying that emotion, but of doing it in such a way that it's not cheesy. It's very, very easy to take a sentiment like what you're talking about, the loss, the melancholy, but then again, the acceptance and the nostalgia. It's real easy to take that and make it cheesy,
yeah, like that song
unintentional.
"Feelings."
Yes, absolutely.
That's
The
over the top.
sentiment is deep, but the song is just cheesy as hell. It really is. I'm sorry.
It's excessive,
Hmm.
but it's excessive. So if you were to, and I hate to to break it down, but I not really. I don't actually. I want to break it down. That's why I'm doing it. You say you hate to do something because that's trying to be kind and polite, roughly somewhere. But the truth is that if I didn't
Well,
want to go there, I would.
it's also a defense mechanism because you're deflecting the slings and arrows that are coming, that you think are coming.
That's true too. Well, but it's my own. I'm mostly worried about my own flings and arrows because I'm recognizing in myself the possible, But whatever. So I'm involved in the problem too. Because I recognize it. Okay, so if you thought of our point of references in throughout the decades that we've existed in, and though I'm a Johnny Come Lately within the three span decade that we've existed in
Hmm.
in the early part, like you, I begin to overlap where your second decade begins. Let's say
Hmm. Yeah,
is what I'm getting at.
yeah.
We have overlap, we recognize this, but we have
Mhm.
overlaps that even though there's that span, and the same can be said with all our friends in the chat. Um, our points of reference, like let's put it this way, we can and have spent whole evenings rambling about said things that occurred in
Sure.
the century past, and
Uh-huh.
there's only one way to be able to do that at the level that we do. Well, there's various levels, but at the level that we do, because we could do that if we were 200 years out, and we could
Sure.
reflect on history, but we are talking about things that we experienced or derivatives of things that we experienced in decades past. You can't just do that if you don't have a connection. So we understand. So what I'm getting at is that you and I and everyone here, to one degree or the other, understands those little key signals that go blinky blinky when certain words or certain songs or certain themes appear that give us that feeling of that's good stuff or that's corny stuff.
Hmm.
So I'm answering in a way your thing, which I agree with, about some things are just tacky or some things are just over the top. So here's the thing: we have similar reference points, or know of people. Like, let's say we knew there was disco people. I knew there was disco people as
Hmm.
a kid. We knew
Yeah.
some disco people didn't partake in your idea of how you see disco. They
Hmm.
thought disco was bad to the freaking bone, whereas you would have. And I had no real one way or the other. I just thought it's not rock and roll, so it's like, But what, I was too little to even, But
Hmm.
I saw this. Okay, well, if you and I were back in medieval times and people were playing the lyre or whatever darn, whatever, that would be cool now. But if you take that music and transpose it into today's 2024, a whole ton of people are going to think it's cheesy, it's crap, it's this. And so there's horses for courses. There's so many different
Sure.
variations of stuff. But I threw out feelings, and you knew exactly the over the topness that I was
Well,
talking about because we share the point of reference.
exactly. And it was such a, I don't know, when that came out, it
Feeling
was one of those songs you could not get away from.
nothing more.
And I really, really wanted to. you
It's
know?
just so vulnerable in such a. So when Paul Simon is vulnerable,
Hmm.
even though a lot of people may think off the top that he doesn't, but he's being vulnerable in a manly way. Even though he's being sensitive, he's still holding on to. And how does he do it? By using visions and thoughts. It's almost sort of like he's creating a scene, and he usually has the idea of, oh, instead of, oh, why, he's more like reflective and saying, well, this happened, it sure was dark. It's sort of a little
Hey,
bit like the Clint Eastwood of Hollywood, where Clint Eastwood is a tragic figure, and yet people love. So Clint Eastwood is the wanderer. It's a tragic situation, but he doesn't give a
but
crap. He
but
just
Paul
goes and does.
Paul Simon's music is acceptance. It's acknowledgement that this happened, and it's accepted that it's happened. There's
Yeah.
nothing I can do to change it.
So it's manly, but feelings, it's more like,
That was desperation.
exactly.
That was not acceptance. That was, oh my God, rending of cloth and the whole thing,
Yeah. And
and
we can't
just
handle that
like,
one.
are you kidding me, dude?
Yeah, that was total breakdown.
Mhm. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. That was the perfect description. That was a complete and total meltdown.
And that's not entertaining for me, but for some people it is.
Yeah.
I don't The total breakdown, it's way too
You know,
much. But yet for some people it's like, wow. Um
when uh, it's funny when I think about music, when I analyze music, I try to think of why do I like this so damn much? Why did this hit so hard? I can usually find something, either in a bass line or the drums. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's all of the above, the harmonies, something. There is something appealing in most music. A lot of it there isn't. And some of it I can think of, I can't get beyond the squeamish feeling that I get when I hear it to appreciate anything about it. And that's one of those songs.
it's a tough one.
It is.
Um okay, so I'm going to get into the topic, which is still associated with music in a very direct way. Um but I'll open it up like this. It's a loose association that I had, but I thought of a theme and I had mentioned to you. without revealing much, but it's basically within line to music, world. So today, and we'll get to it, but I have to unpack it. Today, my aunt sent me a photograph of myself
Hmm.
and my cousin, my younger cousin, back in 1990 when we were at a beach in Western Florida, Southwest Florida,
I saw it.
along the Gulf Coast, Gulf of Mexico, and we were on vacation. It was 1990, and she sent me the photo, and we're on the beach in the water, shore, and I looked at myself. And at first, I looked at myself and I looked at the younger kid below, and I said, "Whoa!" Because my cousin is a full grown with beard and everything, muscles, and the guy is like today.
Uh huh.
But I'm looking at that picture. I'm fully developed as a human being,
Hmm.
standing in the water. I was like 15 years old, but I was like, in shape. And I'm looking at myself in shape, like the stomach. Like I'm looking at the picture.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the whole scenery. I'm like, holy smokes! And by the way, in that picture, my face looks just like my granddad's face.
Hmm.
To be honest with you, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, yeah, that's me. I can't escape that one. That's me. But it's like the figure. I'm looking at it. I was like, holy smokes! And then I talked to my aunt. I texted her and I said, well, Tia, when exactly was this? I want to say that my cousin, your son, looks 5, and I'm probably a teenager, but I can't quite. Is this Sanibel? I asked her. She says yes. This was around 1990 when
Hmm.
we went on vacation, and I remembered the whole event.
Hmm.
But I had never seen pictures from it because
Hmm.
those are hers with her collection. And then I tried to timeline it, and I remembered a lot of things that were going on. But one of the things that, and which we'll leave to the side, but I had a girl back in Miami, that we were soon to be broken up,
Hmm.
a beautiful Cuban girl, and things went, astray, wrong direction, and it is what it is. Um, but I thought of other things too. My parents at the time, like just all sorts of things, my friends and such, at that cornerstone, and I tried to attach it to all the other pictures that I have and the timeline that I have in order to reconstruct. I've been doing a lot of reconstructing, as you well know. Okay,
Yeah.
mostly stuff beyond my timeline, but whatever. And then I remembered, well, what was important and what was the music that was going on right at that time. And I know that you and I have talked about it, all of us together here,
Oh yeah.
but I wanted to delve in. And so I looked at the timeline, of what was coming up and what I was listening to. So that's what I want to share with you. And then I want to ask you, after I explain a little bit of the music that I'm about to say, which I'm sure we'll get
Hmm.
talk about something there. But I wanted to also ask you, countering that, or in addition to that, from your vantage point, in a decade moment of transition, because 1990, I'm 15 years old, 15 to 16 years old, and that's the era that I had just passed in the 80s, the transition from the 80s into the 90s, and a lot of stuff was happening there that created a whole to do within the music world, let alone society at large, but just because it is what it is, time forward. Um, but I wanted to see if there's an equivalent to you that you would place under this category of what I'm about to say. So, here's the thing. That was 1990, roughly. I think it was 1990 on the dot. But I want to start in 1989. Okay, 1989. The music that had come across that whole decade was very important, as we've talked. For me, it was super important. Just the age, the era, and the situation. So the I'm just gonna name the songs or the albums that came out that I had in my room that I played. One of them that came out in 1989, and I'm looking at it now, was "Full Moon Fever" by
Tom
Tom
Petty.
Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Hmm.
Um, I bought that when it came out.
Hmm.
I was knee deep in the rock and roll, dude.
Hmm.
Knee deep in the rock and roll, and that album was playable from beginning to end. Every single track was a wonderful experience. Loved it. Loved the cover, loved smelling the cover,
Mhm.
loved looking at the liner notes, loved the just all of it. Did you have that album?
Full Moon Fever? No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Okay, so that's one. Um, I'm just gonna name a few that I owned, right? So that's one. The other one that came out that year in 1989 was the album Pump by Aerosmith.
Aerosmith, yeah.
Now here's the thing.
Didn't have that one either.
But did you ever have Aerosmith albums?
Yeah, I had a few. I had Toys in the Attic and a couple of others.
Okay, there it is. I had Toys in the Attic. But here's the thing. I don't know what was going on with Aerosmith because all this speaks to our timelines, music wise.
Mhm.
And it's important to me because I was so into music and whatnot. Okay, my reference point to Aerosmith was Toys in the Attic.
Mhm.
My reference point to Aerosmith was Permanent Vacation, which
Mhm.
came out sometime then, which was Ragdoll,
Mhm.
all that stuff. My friend George, I hope he doesn't mind that I mention his name. I'll just keep it at the first name. Um, would always acquire music that I wasn't aware of,
Mhm.
and that's how you exchange.
Mhm.
And he brought, or maybe I wasn't focused on, and he brought Pump, and it was just fantastic. I think it had Love in an Elevator
Yeah.
and this, and that, and the other. Um, Janie's Got a Gun and other song. Um, and he brought that song to. In fact, my friend George, across that era, would bring albums that I wasn't focused on, and it would open my mind. He doesn't know that. Maybe one day I'll talk to him about it. But he also brought Queen albums
Mhm.
that were off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Like he'd do that every now and then, and I like that kind of stuff. Um, I had various friends that well, actually, we all did that because we
Sure.
exchanged ideas. But
Oh,
so anyways, Pump. I didn't have that one in my possession that I'm aware of, but I recorded it off of him probably.
sure. We all did that.
Another major, which this one I did go to the mall and purchase like right away,
Mhm.
was Skid Row's first album, where
Okay.
it had 16 in life,
18 in life. 18 in life. Yeah.
18 in life, 16,
Well,
12
I've
years
heard
old.
it. I've heard it, but I never had. That was the whole hair metal thing, and that wasn't my style. I was off into other stuff. I was off into blues and southern rock. Yeah.
Okay, um, so yeah, there's well, the guys that were singing that stuff were your age at
Hmm.
that time. You understand?
Yeah,
So
I do.
we were listening to yeah. So okay, but it was geared towards us kids coming
Hmm.
up.
Yep.
In a sense, that's just basically how it works. And they really went crazy with the. But so that album was classic for me. It was unbelievable, and I can't tell you how many repeats again and again. Classic album. This is 1989,
Hmm.
and I'll just list a couple of others. There were probably more, but I'm just looking through here. Um, I'm sure there's one more. Oh, we could stick with those because apart from that, there was also heavy metal stuff that I was listening to. Um, okay, but then the transition. I'll finish off with what I'm getting to into 1990, and I'm looking at it while I'm saying that were important to me. Let me look. Let me look. Let me look. So one that came out was Extreme. There was a song, the album called Porno Graffiti. This
Hmm.
album, these people were very polished, and they sang more than word, more than
Yeah,
word, and all this and that. Loved the album. It was crazy. It was 1990. Then, although I didn't have the album, I'll mention it. Razor's Edge by AC/DC.
I had that one. Still got it on CD.
So, for some reason, I had a bias
Hmm.
where I thought that AC/DC from back in the 80s
Hmm.
were the ones. Everything prior. I thought that the hallmark was the Black Album,
The Back
Back
in
in Black,
Black,
Back in Black. To
same
me,
band.
I know, but I'm saying in my mind,
Hmm.
my point of reference of importance for that band,
Hmm.
where I felt that all the check marks were checked and the boxes or the boxes were checked, was that album, and everything else seemed like it didn't quite get it. So when that came out, even though that lead guitar that he plays in that video was extreme over the top badass,
Hmm.
and I liked it, but I always referred back to an earlier version of what they were doing as the key thing. And I remember thinking that more or less at the time, where I'm thinking, man, but ACDC, my ACDC, and the Bon Scott stuff
Hmm.
was a little bit too far at the time. Where I'm like, okay, but no, it's Back in Black. That's the one.
Hmm.
Um, that's just how I thought. I mean, it's
Well,
neither here
but
nor
it
there.
you got to admit it's also one of the biggest selling albums of all time. Okay, it's up there. It's one of the biggest selling albums worldwide of all time.
Back in Black.
Back in Black. So you are not alone in that thought, in that feeling.
There's just something powerful. There's something powerful about. I guess the lyrics are she was a
A
sex machine.
fast machine, she kept her motor clean.
She was the best damn woman that a kid ever
Ever
seen.
than I ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah, she and then she moves she moves her hips side to side, and something American, this and this and that. I could just picture some American girl, hot as a button, and all, the confetti up in the air, in her Daisy Dukes with a cowboy hat, walking down or riding down the high. It was just perfection in it. It's perfection.
Mhm.
So the album is like the stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, so but they had this Razor's Edge, which I didn't partake, but it was there. I just gotta pick one more that I want to share, which I'm not gonna be able to do because I'm looking here just quickly. So we'll stick with what did I say that came out, the one that I had. I actually haven't said any of them. Extreme. Oh, and Empire. So there was a band called Queen's Reich,
Yeah.
and they had Silent Lucidity, Jet City Woman, badass. I was into that. I remember my mindset at the time, listening to all this music. It meant the world to me.
Mhm.
Um, and it just that was the soundtrack going on as we existed. Um, and then something happened. That was '89, and then '90s came, and the grunge occurred. Oh, and by the way, that's in the '80s was also in the backdrop of all the cool stuff that we all know,
Mhm.
plus a band that you don't necessarily, as you've mentioned before, it's not like you're too keen on it, but Guns N' Roses was really influential. Okay, in the '80s for us, you couldn't. There's no escaping it. Guns N' Roses was something. I mean, there was something so rebel about it, and whatever, you can say that about any band at any time, but there was something uniquely badass about it. It just is what it is, and so but then the '90s came, and as we've talked about before, we enter the grunge era, and I'm just looking at the list of the albums that I had in 1991. I went to the store at the mall and purchased Nevermind by Nirvana, which is that album cover where there's a baby floating inside the thing in the pool.
Mhm.
That whole album was a rearranging of all the things that we had perceived as acceptable
Yeah.
in music, or the norm, or the cool, because they eliminated all the glossy, glittery stuff,
Yep.
and I liked it. But I liked it in combination with all the other stuff, except that this Nirvana had something just very, very, it was grunge, and I liked it, but I know it was the beginning of the end. Um, and I listened to it, and the hurricane came, Hurricane Andrew,
Mhm.
and I remember having my little Walkman and helping my dad fix up the house to get it ready and listening to that. Um, and it was an important thing. Just to finish off, Octoon Baby came out, which is U2's album,
Hmm.
key album. The album 10 by Pearl Jam came out. Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A better album than that you could not find. Um, No More Tears I also owned by Ozzy Osbourne. Fantastic album. And countless others. Countless others. Okay. But I just wanted to, I guess, mention that in that little trifecta of history of 3 years between the transition from the 80s to the 90s,
Hmm.
we had the themes of the past pushing forward through the hair metal of the present,
Hmm.
and then Nirvana and the grunge sliced it off at the past by sheer volume of its sheer weight, of people listening to it and enjoying it, and the old became passe. I remember it well.
Yeah, grunge was the death of hair metal because, as you said, they stripped out all the glamour and glitz and glitter and brought it back down to its basic thing. You had one guitar, bass, and drums, and that was it.
So, in my mind, although we continued on forward, the 80s, from its inception in 1980
Hmm.
to its final hurrah in 1989, that's 10-year span for me
Hmm.
was very special in the music sense because not only was I growing up in
Hmm.
that time, leaving childhood into adult or into teenage years, let's say,
Hmm.
where girls are getting more and more involved and all these things, which take up,
Yeah.
actually you freely leave all the other stuff behind. But it was the era of comic books, it was the era of baseball cards, it was the era of the rock and roll, it was the era for me, it
Mhm.
was the era of all that stuff in the backdrop of what the 80s was. But once that 1990s began, the year after, it was still there in 1990, but the year after, cut off at the pass. Here comes, and and people knew something was coming, and that was the end of the hair metal. And everybody looked passe after that. Everybody looked passe.
Yeah. Well, it was basically the same for us. Now, I can't give you a list of albums because you've had a lot more time to think on this. But just my reaction to it is when hair metal started, a good percentage of us had the same reaction to hair metal that you had to grunge. That just wasn't our style of music. But we also understood that everything prior to that was now passe. So, um, Black Sabbath was passe. Nazareth was passe. Montrose, Sammy Hagar himself was passe because now you've got to get into that glam rock and then hair metal. So we had more or less the same reaction.
Well, wait a
And
second.
so when you took notice of the switch over to grunge and the decline in popularity of hair metal, you kind of went backward in time. I did too. I kind of went back into the 70s and started listening to and appreciating some of the music that I didn't pay attention to while it was new and fresh, you know?
Wait a second, though. Let me work with this. See what you say.
Hmm.
The hair metal,
Hmm.
as opposed to the stuff in the past,
Hmm.
accepted people like Black Sabbath, accepted people like Kiss, accepted the bands in the 70s because many of those bands in the 70s, like Aerosmith, just simply kept going within the hair metal world, and because they came out of this thing called glam.
Well, yeah, Kiss is a good example of that because Kiss caught on to that glam rock thing that started with David Bowie and Iggy Pop and the rest of them. And they turned it up to 11 with the theatrical performing style and all the makeup and the costumes and the masquerade and everything. They turned it up to 11. And they were huge when I was in high school. We're talking about, I was, we're looking at 76, 77. They were absolutely enormous. And that was the beginning of kind of a divide in the rock and roll because they became so popular. They were the badass band. Groups like Black Sabbath and Nazareth and Leonard Skinner kind of went, no, that's the old stuff. This is the new stuff. This is the future. And I'm like, really? Really? I mean, I had a couple of their albums, but I wasn't an absolute fanatic for them like my little brother and a couple of other folks I knew were. But when hair metal came along, we saw that as a departure, the same kind of a departure that Kiss took, because that we saw Kiss as theater. We liked the music, but it's like, really, this is ridiculous. This is kind of, some folks were all for it, and some folks were kind of, really. We saw hair metal in the same way. I remember one poster of the group Cinderella, and the first thing that popped into my mind was, how much money do these people spend on hairspray? That
I
was
had
only that was the only thing that would come to mind, because you're talking about dudes with long hair, but it's up here.
I had an album of Cinderella that it was white and purple, and when you took out
Mhm.
the vinyl was purple.
Yeah.
And I think they had a song called "Gypsy." My gypsy rose can't take me home.
Mhm.
Something, something, something. I'd have to look at it on YouTube. That's a cool thing of YouTube. Um, I don't know. I can't judge it proper with from your era, from mine, but I I want to feel. I want to say that I sort of stylistically the hair metal isn't far removed from the metal that was
No,
occurring in
it's
the
not.
70s.
No,
It's
you're
just the egg the shell outside that's changing, because
right.
now you're going David Bowie wild, but there was hints of that back then
Well, even well, back then, hair metal was seen as commercialized heavy pop.
in the
That's what
80s.
we thought. Yeah, my older generation, we thought of it as commercialized pop.
Well, it
Yes, it's
was.
heavier. Yes, it's heavier. But, and there are a couple of exceptions to that rule. Okay. I would not call Van Halen hair metal.
Well, they
I,
were.
I wouldn't call them hair metal. I mean, David Lee Roth, him, yes, but the rest of the band, no.
Well, it's all just metal.
But yeah, it is. You're right.
But the hair metal is pointing at the 80s phenomenon with the excesses, but that excess, or these guys
Mhm.
were looking at, and ladies, because look at Joan Jett, they were
Lita
all
Ford, the Runaways. Yeah.
Lita Ford. I went to a party last Saturday
Mhm.
night. I didn't get laid. I got in a fight. Okay, so all that stuff that they were listening to in the 70s and 60s
Mhm.
was informing them as they were producing the music in the but so so I guess what I'm saying, like, I'm not trying to take it away. I'm just trying. I guess what I'm saying is that for some, grunge removed not only physical,
Mhm.
like they went dirty, like they went hippie dirty.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, they went even worse than that because they went like hobo. Um,
Yeah.
but internally, music wise, they also changed the landscape where they stripped it all down. Is what I'm getting at. Whereas before, you had a progression of advance other than punk.
Hmm.
Punk music was a degradation of quality,
Yes. Yeah.
but
And
grunge did the same.
and I was just getting ready to use that metaphor. And use that as a metaphor. Punk did the same thing
Hmm.
to rock and roll that grunge did to hair metal, because that was a further divide that just split up into a whole bunch of different categories. So,
Did you click that? Oh, he said that twice. I was gonna try to. Okay,
okay, yeah, we saw Queensryche in Germany. Yeah, it was the Monsters of Rock, 1991. Was so the opening band was the Black Crows, then Queensryche, then Motley Crue, then Metallica, then AC/DC was the headliner. So if you have seen the video of Metallica playing Enter Sandman in front of 1.6 million people in Moscow, it was that same tour. We saw them 21 days before they went to Moscow. So, hell of a show. Hell of a show. Very long show. And I watched the first quarter of it from the control tower on the airfield through binoculars.
we had a lot of buddies that naturally across the '80s into the '90s and beyond. I think it's just by being so young
Hmm.
and having flexibility. They all happened to pick up instruments along the way. I mean, some of them were doing it early on.
Hmm.
I was, um,
I
but
tried.
I was playing guitar. Okay, I had a guitar.
Hmm.
I had little instructional books that my dad had purchased me. Um, but I didn't want to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I didn't want to learn that.
Hmm.
It was a turn off. I wanted to rock and roll. For goodness sakes, even if I had to use the guitar as a prop without knowing how to play it, I just wanted to.
Yep.
But everybody started picking. That's what I'm saying early on. But you slowly start to climb little knowledge ladders and practice and such, and it just happens or it doesn't or it kind of does,
Yeah.
whatever the case. Um, they all picked up and we all started playing music with each other in different combinations,
Mhm.
and it just happened all across Miami. Um, so all that was involved. But during that time, and so if you're a kid in your room back then, the best you can hope for to recreate the sounds of the bands or musicians you like,
Yeah.
if you're just one kid, is to basically go for folk blues or just be there practicing little chops and stuff. But you're not going to reproduce a full scale orchestra band,
No.
rocking and rolling to whatever, because you're not. So what was more reasonable to me
Hmm.
was to practice blues
Hmm.
a- and Beatles songs, because you could contain them in yourself in a doable way, more or less. Whereas you can't reproduce "Talk Dirty to Me" by who's Poison or
No,
whoever,
but you can sit down with a guitar and figure out a 12-bar blues.
but you can do that, right?
Yeah.
So you choose,
Hmm.
or I chose to do that, but my friends
Hmm.
wanted to reproduce internally and externally the grunge phenomenon.
Hmm.
And although I had experimental feelings of rocking it in
Hmm.
strange chord progression and doing different little oddity or being more Like I had no problem with that, but I had this pull. There's something about the blues that speaks to me at the very clear
Mhm.
level. It just tells me, hey,
Yeah.
this life ain't easy. I've been I stubbed my toe one too many times. Let me tell you about it. Ow, it hurts. That's the blues. They just
Hmm.
tell you what it is. And the other stuff is more intricate and this and that in different ways. And so I deviated from the pack alone.
Yeah.
Nobody else wanted much to partake in that, which is the blues. I was actually, my friends would
Well,
actually say, "Oh, Eloy again with the blues,
I
the
can
blues."
I can tell you that blues was in the middle of a dramatic decline during that time. So them saying that is basically
What was happening?
that was what was going on. There were very, very few people listening to any of the blues artists, unless you're talking about the old stuff. There were still folks who were listening to Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, but nobody was paying any attention to Buddy Guy. Nobody paid attention to George Benson until he started covering more popular tunes
I
that were
listened to
already
George
out
Benson.
there.
I was into George Benson. I had I don't need to hear vocals to
Mhm.
enjoy the music. I enjoy, and I like the guitar, all of it. I enjoyed all of it, or at
Right.
least a lot of it. A lot of it.
But you were a majority of one, is
Mhm.
what I'm getting at. There, I was right there with you. I had Bad Benson. That was a good album. But fo- tastes were turning at that time, and blues was on a serious decline, you know. And you can pretty much, I hesitate to say you can 100% credit Stevie Ray Vaughan for bringing it back, but he was a big, big, big part of it. I mean, when you got, lily white kids like me listening to Albert King, who had never heard an Albert King song in his life, you have made an impact. You know, I got intrigued with the music. I got involved in listening to that music, and I got hungry for more of it. And it was because of Stevie Ray. That brought it back up. And there are more blues aficionados now, I think, than there ever were in the 70s or 80s. Even though rock and roll is almost 100% blues in basis, it's sped up. But
Yeah, the
without
labels.
blues, you don't have rock and roll, and that's all there is to it.
Well, the labels that are used
Mhm.
for rock and roll
Mhm.
with the different genres within the subcategory,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of overlap between different genres where
Sure.
one band might be one foot in one spot and one in the other. Like there's a lot of intermixing with sounds and styles and the actual structure of songs. But when you take hair or makeup or dress
Mhm.
plus the music, if you use all the variations and then you look at a band, people usually can signal them into one category or the other, but the category definitions are more like a moving chess piece as opposed to a like a floating chess piece as opposed to um a solid thing broadly speaking. So we tend to in some cases it's hard to define a band. Are they this or are they that? When they can be a little bit of everything, but the umbrella rock and roll is also a problem because to me, if you wanted to get down to the nitty, it would be, in my opinion, the music of Little Richard, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry. To me, that's the official Eddie Cochran. That's the official the Coasters. That is rock and roll.
But that's the beauty of rock and roll, is because everybody can define it for themselves.
No,
I
but
think
the
that's I
inception.
think that oh yeah, well the inception, of course. But if you look at country and western today, It's nothing like the inception of country and western.
No.
So everything has evolved. And I'll take it back to Billy Joel. Hot funk, cool punk, even if it's old junk, it's still rock and roll to me. The music is going to evolve, whether we like it or not. So the only thing, we can't control that. But the only thing I control is my reaction to it. And I'll listen. If I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, I don't like it now. But that doesn't mean I won't like it later, because I've gone back and listened to some old music that I never listened to before because it, quote unquote, wasn't my style. And there's a new appreciation for stuff that I thought was just, I would have hit the button on the radio the minute it came on. I don't want to hear that. Let's find something good.
I can see that. I can see you driving somewhere in Oregon, and then you flip the dial, and then all of a sudden, now to get ready, get ready. Sugar, dun, 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 dun,
Click.
oh honey, honey.
I didn't even get to the second verse.
So that one you're
The
not
first
gonna.
sugar, sugar, it was gone.
You are my
I
candy
mean, we had some
girl.
weird stuff, and you could only hope that when you changed it from sugar, sugar, it wasn't on the other channel, because up here we had two channels, like KBOY and we had KYJC, and I would only switch over to KBOY when something like that came on. I would rather listen to Kermit the Frog singing Rainbow Connection than anything by the Archies. Okay. So,
It's different when you're Let me let my dog. I'm just gonna pull. I'm using my keyboard to stretch and open the by clenching the doorknob and then
ooh,
pulling
let the
the
dogs
door,
out.
and that's sufficient for me. Um, yeah, well,
Yep, there's Jim Dockrell. I still love little itty bitty one. Yeah, isn't that itty bitty pretty one? Little bitty pretty one. That's doo wop. But yeah, it's rock and roll. I mean, I'm into it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I was about 13, 14, my absolute favorite movie was American Graffiti. I saw that movie in the theater 33 times. I've got it. I had it on VHS. I've got it on one of the other computers in the other room. I've watched that movie so many times I can sit here and quote lines of dialogue to you. I wore out. It was a 2 album soundtrack. I wore out 2 sets playing that music over and over and over again. That was so popular. They came out with a second album called More American Graffiti. They tried a sequel. I saw it. It wasn't as good. They tried too hard. It wasn't as good. Eh. The album, and that's the weird part, the album More American Graffiti was not the soundtrack to the movie More American Graffiti. But that's beyond the point. I was right there with that kind of music. I loved it. My parents loved that I loved it because that's what they grew up on. That was their music. Beatles, Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, the Mamas and the Papas. Then we graduated into Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Creedence Clearwater Revival and Chicago, back when they were good with Terry Kath. That was morphing into the 70s. I mean, the Summer of Love came and went. The hippie movement came and kind of went and died off. We had the Woodstock, and then we got into the mid 70s, and then disco started to pick up. And I said, check, please. I moved into Southern rock, got into Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers and Molly Hatchet, because to me, they were the keepers of the flame. They kept the rock and roll going, because well, you always had Black Sabbath and you had Nazareth and you had uh, Sammy Hagar. You know, Standing Hampton was an excellent album. But as the disco got more and more popular, you know, it was getting fewer and further in between that you could had good music on the radio, and you just pop a tape into the tape player and listen to that, and occasionally pull it out and hear, yeah, it's still disco, and plug another one back in. So we had to, the escapism on my part, yes, music was an escape, but it was escape from disco. you know, I would much rather sit down and put on the James Gang or Pink Floyd or the band and just say, to hell with Casey and the Sunshine Band. I don't care about them, you know. So,
Um, let's see if you can do this. I mean, it came to my mind, so it's going to be a little bit of an awkward thing, but I'll just say, you know how images pop into your head? Sometimes it can occur in certain succession where it appears in your head a moment in time, a snapshot, and you
mhm,
know that place and time at that moment. In the context of music, I'm gonna shoot off a few, and let's see if you can do something similar. Briefly, myself, I'll say. In my car, and by the way, before I say this, these are things that are in my head that I can bring forward like that, and we're just placing it sometime in the past and just leaving it free flowing. So time allotment or time placement is one thing. We're
okay.
just giving you the subconscious blurting it out.
Hmm.
In my car, stopped next to the bank in Sweetwater, about to get up on Flag or 107th, turn a left. I remember the moment that I listened to the first time Billy Joe's. I had the cassette that my friend lent me, and I used to replay and replay River of Dreams. That was probably sometime in the 90s. I remember the moment that I popped it in, and I'm sitting there. I can picture it in my car, and I'm about to make a left. And I remember that moment and listening to it and saying, "Man, I love this album." I remember that moment, and that's a real moment in the past. I remember the moment I was driving down 16th Street, which today is called, or which then was called Jose Canseco Street after the Cuban baseball player.
Jose Canseco, yeah.
Hmm. That's what it was called then. Now it's just 16th Street. And I'm driving, and I got into the shopping mall where there's a Publix. Even back then, there was a Publix there. Um, there's always been a Publix there. And I was listening to on cassette Bob Dylan, the album with uh the album where he's singing electric. See, now I forget the album, but it's the first one he came out with. Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, you threw the bums of
Oh,
dime in your prime, didn't you?
yeah.
You used
Like a
to
Rolling
talk
Stone.
about Rolling Stone.
Hmm.
That album. That album I would play again. I remember the moment. Now, this may not have been the first moment that I played it or the last, but I remember a moment specifically for some reason that can pop out of my head that I'm right there going into that shopping mall by Jose Canseco Street with that music. I was probably the only one in that whole area playing that song.
Listening to Bob Dylan.
I was probably the only one in a perimeter of like 10 miles that was even listening to Bob Dylan. I remember that. I remember coming out of the mall listening to the Beatles that I had bought a cassette tape of, and listening to it as I popped it in and hearing the songs because I wanted to learn, and it blew my mind, and I couldn't believe I was taking that home with me. Just three little events that I can picture, push it out into share it here, that are real things that I experience that are simple things, but that I can still remember. How about yourself?
Oh, there are a few. I remember putting the cassette. I saw it, we were stationed in Germany, in my old beater BMW. This thing was such trash. When I sold that BMW to another soldier, I told him, I said, look, I'm selling you the stereo. You got to take the car that comes with it. It was that bad. Um, I found a cassette at the PX. It was Stevie Ray Vaughan, the The Sky Is Crying. That was
Oh man.
the album that came out after he had died.
Yeah.
And I plugged that in,
I couldn't believe it.
and the sky is crying. And that was just it for me. And I'm driving from the PX back to the airfield that I worked at. I don't even remember why I was down in town, but I had to go do something down there. I think I had to go to the finance office or something like that. And I swung through the PX to grab something to eat on the way back. The PX, the Post Exchange, it's a like a almost like a department store, but it also has like a convenience store. They call it the shop at. Then it's got a small, very small food court, what have you. And driving back, listening to that, and it was just like, holy hell, this was really him, because that album was a compilation of music he had done, he had recorded,
Mhm.
but didn't work out for one reason or another. Either it was just they already had enough for the album, or he didn't think it was good enough.
His brother finished compiling it, by the way.
Right. Yes. Jimmy did. He compiled the whole thing. Um, I remember when I got back to, because I didn't get to listen to the whole thing. I either got back home or I got to the airfield, and I finally got to remember the old cassettes where you pull out the label. You had the plastic cassette and you pulled out the label, and sometimes they folded out to give
Mhm.
you the liner notes of the album.
Hmm.
Um, I was listening to Little Wing, and it, Jimmy is talking about it. Little Wing is the song that reminds me most of my brother. He wanted to record Little Wing for an album, but he never got the right version. He said he never got a version he liked best. He said, Jimmy said he put this version on this album because it reminded him most of listening to his brother play. What Stevie didn't like about this version was if you listen, his amp is buzzing in the background. When he comes from real loud and gets real quiet again, you can hear his amp buzzing in the background. And sure enough, you can. But to me, you talk about textures and you talk about raw. To me, that's like a flaw in leather, in fine leather work. That's nature. That's natural. That's human.
Yeah.
And that's what made that special to me, was little things like that. That was, for instance, the soundtrack to the movie Woodstock. You hear um, feedback a lot. Santana's Soul Sacrifice, when they come back in, a real loud crescendo. I mean, feedback through amps, microphone, beep, like that, and it just. But to me, that's human. That is power. That's real power. When you are overdriving and you are playing so hard that you're feeding back through your microphone, yeah, that's as kick ass as anything Slash ever played. To me, that's it. It's right there. You
What
know,
other moment that pops up?
um,
Like a
that
moment you heard a song in conjunction with a moment.
that is one of them right there. The first time I heard that Soul Sacrifice on the Woodstock album, sitting in the living room with headphones on in a cheap armchair that I think my mother bought from the hotel she was working at when they replaced the furniture. She was a hotel maid for a while, short time, very short time. And they were selling off a bunch of furniture, and she brought home lamps and some chairs. But sitting in the stereo, sitting right next to the stereo, it was off to my left. The headphones plugged into it, and a 6-foot coiled up cord, and me, I'm 11, 10, and it's just like, holy hell, what is this? It was that fusion of rock with the Latin rhythm and that Latin feel. I'd never heard anything like that before in my life. All I knew was I liked it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I liked it. Let's see. Um, what else? Other moments like that.
A
Most of them,
moment, a moment a moment instead of you trying to um uh rope it in, a moment that connects in a specific moment, except hoochie coochie time. I'm sure they can, but just broadly, because well, one
yeah,
time as I was huffing and puffing and
yeah.
blowing the house
Well,
down,
then we won't talk at all about anything Moody Blues. Okay.
nights in stained in white satins.
Exactly. And that album right there is probably responsible for half of the population explosion of that time period. That album, Days of
And
Future
I
Past.
love you, and the eyes rolling into
Well,
the back.
but you got to remember that's the last song on the album. But that's the end. That's the finale. But um when it comes to most music that I heard, that I was exposed to for the first time, that was totally new to me, that's in conjunction with being at a friend's house, because that's how we discovered music. If you didn't hear it on the radio, and there was a lot that didn't get played on the radio because it was too long or it didn't fit that 3 minute AM top 40 time slot, trying to get a 4 minute song played, forget it. An 8 minute tune, forget it. It's not happening. To hear that, you had to, get it through a friend who had the record. And the whole Pink Floyd thing was hanging out with my next door neighbor, and she put on Dark Side of the Moon, and I was like, holy hell, what is this? Then I had to have it. But I got into Pink Floyd later on.
I
It was
couldn't deal with
long
Pink Floyd
after.
until the later 80s. I was listening to Pink Floyd in the 80s as a little kid,
Mhm.
but
Well,
originally I couldn't deal with it
yeah.
because my friend put on the first part of the album, which was like clicking or
Mhm.
whatever, and I couldn't handle it. And I was like,
Yeah.
"What is this, man?" And he's
It,
like, "It's cool."
same here. It was over my head. It was over my head. I didn't get it. And because it wasn't made, I wasn't the target. I mean, when that album came out, I think I was 11 years old, but I wasn't its target. Maybe 12. When did it come out? 70. God, I'm trying to remember when Dark Side came out.
When did Dark Side of the Moon? When did Dark Side of the Moon first come out? March 1973.
73. I was 12. I didn't get it. And I'm like, okay, fine. But when I'm 16, I understood it more and I appreciated what I was listening to. I was the same way with Rush. I didn't get it. I wasn't sure I wanted it.
I can't tell you my first experience listening to psychedelic Beatle era music because I was skipping school. We were at Bayside,
Mhm.
and it was the 60s all over again, let's put it that way.
Well, the Beatles were part of my growing up. I became aware of my surroundings listening to early Beatles. She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. That was just playing. That's the soundtrack of my infancy, you know.
We could do stuff back then that probably is impossible to do now because it was crazy.
Yeah, and along that note, just be thankful that cell phones weren't a thing because there's no evidence.
um
So now you try to get away with some of that stupid stuff. You'd have 15 phones pointed at you.
yeah, there's no escaping it.
Yeah,
I
there's
I,
there's
I
no
do.
plausible deniability.
No, that's long gone at this point.
Mm,
I do want to for our Canadian friends, I do want to mention that the first Rush album that I purchased, and I was just looking it up now to figure on what the timeline was. I remember visiting the mall next to the music store, the record shop, was a T-shirt shop. If you remember back in the day, there would be one real close by. Now you could buy posters and T-shirts at the
Mhm.
shop, but they had an exclusive T-shirt place.
Yeah.
You can get all your gear there. They'd usually have a window display with like Dang Zing on it or Iron Maiden during my era
Mhm.
of that. Um, and stuff for the girls like Poison.
Mhm.
You know, if you're, I liked the band Poison, but if you're a guy, dare not wear. And some guys were bold enough to do it. Nobody told them anything because they looked like dangerous
No,
rockers.
but everybody else was laughing at it behind their backs.
Right. So there's problems
I
with all
wasn't
of
into
that.
hair metal, and I knew that.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, so I remember going, and it was 1989, judging from when it came out, because that's when I went. Or I'm saying that's when I purchased it. So I'm placing it within the year of 1989. The album Presto, I went and was looking for something new to explore, and there was Presto, and it was on sale for like 8.90 something or whatever the case. They had it on
Mhm.
sale,
Yeah.
and I had no idea about Rush.
Mhm.
And I took it on it because it was in the rock category. Took
Right.
it home, and it just so happens to be like one of the few albums that was over drenched
Mhm.
with 1980s synthesizer music, where they went excessive into the synthesizer, and sort of like, so it was kind of very synth oriented, the album, but I still enjoyed the heck out of it, dude.
Well,
I
it
I,
was one of their later albums
I grew
then.
to love that album, but you know how it was. You took a chance with an album, you brought it
Yeah.
home, and if it wasn't quite in your zone, you're still going to repeat play it because you spent money on it. And as you do, you start to find appreciation and unclog your head from, some things can't be helped. Long story short, later I discovered through my friends that played drums and such their other albums, and it was but the one I first picked had nothing to do, broadly speaking, with what they're actually famous for. It's funny.
Um, my initiation into Rush was the first time I heard the song "Free Will," and I thought, "Oh man, this is pretty cool." And that was 1980, I think, on the Permanent Waves album. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I like this. And so I went and I got the album. And then I started, I heard Spirit of Radio. And to me, I thought Spirit of Radio was one of the
Insane.
best songs I'd ever heard
It's just insane.
because that's exactly what it was. I mean, it has so many changes. It has so many tempo changes and style changes. And that was a reflection of what it was to be on the radio or what it was to listen to the radio. Something's on here. Do 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 do. That's okay. Hit the next station. Do 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 do. Then hit another station, and we're into reggae or something like that. Or
Yeah.
you spin the dial, and you get that huge ballsy transition where they drop down into reggae. And it's like, holy hell, how did we get here? I was fascinated by that. And that made me go back and start looking into Rush. I had, I, when I heard Fly By Night, I was aware there was a song out there. It was familiar, but I'd never listened to it. All I knew was the guy that sang it had a high voice. Okay, fine. But I never paid attention to it. I went back and I checked it out, and it's like I was hooked from then, you know.
Man, there were so many cool in school. There were so many guys that were rock, totally into rock, that they would share. I mean, we weren't thinking about it. They're like, here comes this one guy, and he says, "Yeah, man, have you heard the Anthrax album?" I
Yeah.
don't know which one. Oh, they have this one, Among the Living. Among the Living. Can I borrow? Yeah, man, go ahead. And then we'd switch it up. Oh, can I record this one? Yeah, I'll bring it back on Monday. Okay, yeah. And it was like this beehive of activity. Everybody
Mhm.
going to their little stereos at home,
Yeah.
recording what everybody else had, and then bring it back. And you had, and so there was this whole thing. But it was so cool. Look, one thing about now, which I harp on a lot because I'm fascinated by it. I'm stuck with it. That's my paradigm, or
Mhm.
one of them. Um, Today we can be incredibly we today we can be better travelers than ever in our past.
Mhm.
Today in 2024, we have access
Yeah.
through the computer and internet and whatnot to time travel much more than we ever were able to in the past, so instantaneously.
And find music you forgot about.
Yeah.
Find groups and songs that you forgot even existed. Holy crap, I haven't heard this in 30 years. I forgot these people existed, you know?
Or you can place, like has happened to me, just like I mentioned with Chico and the Man,
Mhm.
you can fill in the blanks that was missing during your growing up, because we didn't have every access to everything. Our attention span, or not our attention span, but our available amounts of stuff that we could consume due to our
Mhm.
placement, you know, our
Yeah.
time allotment, we didn't have all the information from the time that we lived in at that time.
Well,
Now we can add those bits that are missing.
yeah, and we can go back and fill in the blanks,
Yeah.
because and that's why I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but this is a fleeting thought, we'll see. Maybe that's why our generation and the generation prior to us connected more with music than we did with like television. Yeah, we had our favorite shows, but we connected more with music because we could own and possess the music. We couldn't own and possess those TV shows. They were fleeting. We were on their schedule. If you wanted to watch Welcome Back Kotter, you had to wait till Tuesday night at this time on ABC. And if your dad wanted to watch something different, you didn't get to see it this week.
Mhm.
You know, there was no way for us to possess that, but we could possess our music, and we could play it in our bedrooms, or we could take an album to a friend's house and introduce it to them, or we could play it in our cars if we had one, or we could play it in a friend's car and introduce it to them that way.
Yeah.
I got introduced to a lot of music that way. I had never really paid attention. I knew there was a band called Queen, but I didn't really care because I didn't really know what it was.
Yeah.
I heard the album Night at the Opera, went out and got it that same day because I thought, yeah, I can get into this. And I picked up a few albums. The Game was another very underrated album of theirs, I thought.
All their After the fact, because they were coming out with music
Mhm.
the whole time, but I was just like you, I wasn't paying attention to it. One of the
Well,
things my friend would go ahead.
not only that, but you didn't turn on the radio and hear Queen.
No.
You didn't hear, you would hear a couple of songs by the Steve Miller Band, but they were the real short ones. And my introduction to the Electric Light Orchestra was riding in a friend's car going to school. And Evil Woman was real popular at the time. So I was like 15, maybe 16.
I heard them very early on in the 70s, and I was a
And
little baby.
and I liked that song. So I went back, and it just so happened that either that same week or the next week they were on either the midnight special or Don Kirshner's rock concert. And I stayed up late to watch, and they happened to be on. And they played a couple of songs. One of them was Strange Magic. And I went, oh, no, no, I've got to go find this album. So I went back and I found it. And I started at the very beginning, and went forward. As an example of music that I didn't appreciate at the time and went back and now have an appreciation for, it was my opinion that ELO's New World record that had Telephone Line and all those others on it, to me, Telephone Line was the dividing point of they're nothing but a pop band now versus the Electric Light Orchestra that was good.
He the lead singer,
Jeff Lynne, yeah,
Jeff Lynne,
genius.
he was brought on board sometime in the 90s, I think it was. The Beatles called him to produce, organize, and fix up not only some of the. Basically, when they did the Beatles compilation, I think it's called the Beatles anthology, he was involved in getting that some of the songs, the key songs, together. So he's worked with the Beatles. That's how much trust the Beatles had that they in his quality of music.
You don't know, this is for the public at large. You don't know Jeff Lynne's name, but you know his music. He has produced some of the biggest albums and some of the biggest acts in the world. And he's always maintained his career either with the Electric Light Orchestra, or now it's Jeff Lynne's Electric Light Orchestra, or the Traveling Wilburys, or his solo career. You may not know his name, but you know his music. Same with Mark Knopfler. You may not know his name, you know his music.
So, even though this is going to sound off track, it's going to end up on track in a weird way. But just to introduce some in Europe, there are the different countries with the people that have grown in each particular country.
Sure.
And the natural progression of things and their families and generations marrying and such and that. And within each country, there's groups of people that are referred to as gypsies.
Mm-hmm.
You find them in England, you find them in Germany, you find them all over Europe, and you find them in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
You find them everywhere, these gypsies. In Spanish,
Romani, yeah.
Romani.
Mm-hmm.
In Spanish, they're called gitano.
Okay.
Gitano. And they go from country to country.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they establish themselves. In Spain, there's whole groups of people that have established themselves, and they've been in Europe for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years within their lifestyle specific ways. And they actually originate, well, they've picked up along the way people from into their families, people from all over Europe. But there's a strong Indian component. As in India, are you looking something up?
Yes, I am, but I'm listening.
Well, go ahead. What?
No, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So they have a strong Indian component. Um, Many of these people become all sorts of things, but we're going to stick with the theme: musicians as well.
Uh-huh.
In Spain, there's a flamenco adapted style, or they've picked up the flamenco and joined in with it. So there's this thing called flamenco, which you've heard about, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a guitar oriented type thing. And one group that came out of that, of the flamenco world, was a group called the Gypsy Kings. Now, throughout their time, they have covered various songs to include Hotel California.
Okay.
There's a version that can be found online of Hotel California played in Spanish, or actually they may be Spanish or Portuguese. I'm not sure. They're Iberian,
Mhm.
but they have a background of Romani. Okay,
Right.
um, which is that you can. They're also called Romani, but in Spanish it's Gitano, but it's the same difference.
Okay.
Um, and back in the '80s, my aunt was always looking for music and always she was like the one that had all the and she we got an album from her
Okay.
from the Gypsy Kings, probably one of the first few ones that ever came out. And it was all acoustic Spanish guitar played in rapid. You know how they play.
Yep. And yeah.
I couldn't. This was as big a departure from the rock and roll that we've been speaking of
Sure.
as you could possibly imagine. But I totally got. I loved it, and I actually bought various albums after.
You cannot deny the talent it takes to play that. I mean, the Malayena, holy, you got to have huevos the size of Alpha Centauri to even attempt to do that in public.
Well, the Gypsy Kings,
Hmm.
um, they're this Romani
Hmm.
brothers and sisters, and some of them I think are French.
They may
I'm
very
not
well,
remembering
yeah.
well, but they're very famous in Portugal and Spain,
Hmm.
and some of them either moved to France or they came from France, but they're part of the Romani world. That's the
Hmm.
point. Famous in Spain and in Miami as well because they arrived through Cuba from Spain. You know the whole story.
Yeah.
And I grew up listening to, well, actually, in the '80s on listening to those, and I've always loved it. They have a version of
Mhm.
Hotel California, and it's freaking fantastic. But it's for the purpose of let's rock this out or let's jam this
Mhm.
out. Um, and then they're singing the lyrics in Spanish and all this and that. It's freaking
Mhm.
fantastic. Just wanted to throw that in that that's a variation within the theme of rock and roll coming from outside that at least I experienced here in Miami. Um,
But it's not exclusive to that. That is true. That is 100% true. It's not exclusive to that. This melding of styles and this blending of different genres. I think the more pedestrian listener would be absolutely floored to learn that there is a lot of similarities. There are a lot of similarities and a lot of inspiration from classical music embedded into metal. The number of metal guitarists, and we're talking, heavy duty stuff, who are into classical music, who are into Bach or Beethoven or are into opera, would just floor people because there are a lot of similarities and they take a lot of inspiration from these old composers. The metal has very different chord structures compared to most popular music. It's a very different the way the music is. I'm using all the wrong words.
the way the music is built or
The
constructed is
way it's
different.
constructed, the way it's
Yeah,
assembled is
yeah,
very similar to a symphony.
yeah.
It
It's
may
more.
not sound that way to the pedestrian listener, but if you listen to the layering and you listen to how these chord progressions work, you can pick out. I'll give you a good example. If you listen to, you were talking about the album Razor's Edge earlier. If you listen to Thunderstruck, that opening riff, real fast, that was Angus Young. That was a warm up exercise he used to play.
From now on, every time we start our show, we're gonna we're gonna with no explanation.
Yeah,
With no,
really. There you go. We'll just edit that to the beginning.
but we have to do the whole. But we have to do it the whole
I'll
length.
do a 30-second loop with that in the background. But But that was a finger exercise that he used to warm up with before a performance because it was
Yeah.
fast, it was repetitious, and it made him focus.
I would love
It
that.
was 100% inspired by a piece by Bach. And it was just a lot of arpeggiation that he moved up and down the fretboard and then changed a note here and changed a note there.
Yeah.
But it was 100% taken from a piece by Bach. There are a lot of them who will talk about that. James Hetfield will talk about his connection with classical music. David Draymond from Disturbed. I mean, he is classically trained. He was a cantor for his temple. You don't get much more classically trained than that. There you go, Jim Dockrell. Richie Blackmore was the original classic inspired metal guitarist. I don't know if he was original, but he ding dong sure makes no bones about the fact that he is 100% inspired by classical music. And
Isn't he the one that wrote Highway Star?
oh,
Richie
he wrote so
Blackmore.
many. He wrote so many. I think
Um,
he did.
I wanna, because it just popped into my head. Now a criticism.
Mhm.
I have to do it because we're in the genre of music, and I
Mhm.
have to do. It. But I'm not gonna mess with any of the ones that I've messed with before. I might have touched on this one, but okay. So back in the day, one of the bands that I totally could not understand why any of my friends thought that they were so cool. I couldn't believe it. Number one, okay, I'm just gonna say it. The band, The Cure,
Mhm.
back in the day, I couldn't. I didn't have hate, but I couldn't stand them. And number one, every song they sang was like, Monday I can't get away, Friday I'm in love, and they wore like this powdery makeup and their hair like this, like frigo, and I was, and, and my friends were like totally into it. They were like, man, this is badass, and I couldn't. I had to keep my mouth shut because like they were really invested. But but in my mind, I'm looking at this crap and I'm thinking to myself, what a bunch of sissy. That's what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Now then again,
Yeah.
I mean they're making a fortune and stuff, but that's not the point. The point is
Yeah.
that like Monday I can't break my heart. Tuesday I just laid a fart. I don't know what the hell, and they're crying.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
Well,
I don't understand
that's
it.
that's because you're not a 13-year-old emo girl. That's why you don't understand it.
Yeah,
So.
but my friends shouldn't have been either.
Well, you can't. There's no accounting for taste. I mean, we were on Sugar by the Archies. There's a reason it was so popular. I don't know what it was. It wasn't for me.
Look, Mark. He had jet
Yeah.
black hair. No, look, he had jet black, and his face was powdery white, and
Mhm.
he'd walk on stage like dazed, and like they loved it, and people were
But
like, oh yeah, and I'm
but
looking at
but
them like
so did Marilyn Manson.
I didn't like Marilyn Manson.
Okay, well there you go.
I did not. Number
um,
one, that's well. Go ahead.
now Jamie Page may have just started an argument. We'll see. I had said something about Richie Blackmore was the original classic inspired metal guitarist. I don't know that he was the original, but he damn sure was inspired. And Jamie just said, I thought that was Tony Iommi. Or I think you mean Tommy Iommi, or no, it is Tony Iommi. Excuse
His
me.
friends
God, how
call
could
him
I?
Ted.
Yeah, sure. I have heard it said that he is the originator of heavy metal guitar
With the dun dun dun
with
dun
Black
dun
Sabbath. Yeah,
dun.
with
Dun.
Tony with Black Sabbath. Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Richie Blackmore.
Well, yeah, I am. Okay.
Isn't Rich Blackmore the one that played ran, dun,
Yeah,
dun,
he played. Yeah, he
dun,
was with Deep
dun.
Purple until 1975. Yes, but Jim said that Richie Blackmore was the original classical inspired metal guitarist. Jamie said, I thought that was Tony Iommi. Tony Iommi is credited for inventing the genre of heavy metal. I'll go out on a limb and I'll say I think that that is true. Other people would say no, the Kinks was the first metal band. I think the Kinks were the first to use amplified distortion, but I don't know that you could call that heavy metal.
I don't mean to interject. I mean, I am interjecting, so that's a polite
Yeah,
way of
go for
saying
it.
I'm going to.
That's what a discussion is. I talk a while, you talk a while.
I just
Go ahead.
wanted to say that I just want to acknowledge
Mhm.
the presence, of course, of everybody here, but though because
David Jones.
David has appeared, and I just want to publicly say that I'm me personally. I'll say it even that I'm happy to see him, as with everybody. But since he's so mysterious, he's like a shadow. He's like a
Nope.
moving through the streets at night vampire.
Nope. He's an aroma. He's here, then he's gone.
He
He's an
he's
aroma.
like
It's like walking past a jasmine. It's there, then it's gone.
yeah. I just started thinking no, but I just wanted to acknowledge Portal there.
David's there. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we can continue on.
So I don't know what your opinion is on that. Now the Kinks are credited as the first to use amplified distortion. That and that seems to be documented. That's true. But would you say that Tony Iommi was the originator of metal? Because Black
Black
Sabbath
Sabbath.
was extremely hardcore for the time. We're talking about the late 60s.
Um, I have to refresh my memory, but there's a few issues. Number one, the issue over distortion. The suggestion is that the Kinks were the originators in terms of that because the guitarist,
Mhm.
either by mistake or actually physically slashed or it broke, he scratched the speaker, tore a hole in it, and the vibration of it, he pumped it up to 12 and it created this rumbling sound. And so they say that this is the earliest, but unfortunately, or of recorded sound of distortion. However, the Beatles also have a claim. By the way, I'd have to sit and remember it well. I know that the Beatles also have a claim because there's a feedback on Day Tripper or a Ticket to Ride. I think it was. So there's something going on there, but putting that to the side, there might be a few others. But there's also a claim that well, we have Jimi Hendrix, but we have Cream, and Cream. If you think of what they did early on, may have well the Kinks. As far as heavy metal, it's accepted readily that the whole package was handed down to all of us because of the combination of things that Black Sabbath produced together. They created the nightmarish scenery
Right.
of the lyrics and imagery, plus the down tuning and all that jazz. So,
Mhm.
in my opinion, I would just call them the originators or thereabouts.
Yeah. Um,
You didn't even you got lost.
no, I got lost in that because I'm trying to put the time frame together because the Kinks came along. Oh man, this is going on in my brain. I'm trying to get everything settled.
No, but I would definitely just say that the first, if not one of the first, was Black Sabbath because Black Sabbath also introduced horror movie themes in their music, which was
Yeah,
something brand new. In
yeah.
my, but that's just my opinion.
I There was a lot of that, but their first albums were more war protest than they
No,
were
the
the
the first
horror.
no the first one was a horror extravaganza.
Black Sabbath.
Yeah, their first album was a horror
Um,
extravaganza.
let's see. Looking at Black Sabbath, that first album.
Good night, JP.
Yep, Jamie's gotta go. Jamie's gotta go.
One of
Evil
my favorite,
woman.
one of my, I did a reaction video and I'll never forget it. Where JP he did an album cover for the rock album collab thing, and
Mhm.
he did one by the guy that talking about horror that the guy that did the music for the
Yeah.
Exorcist.
Yeah. Mike Oldfield.
Yeah, and so I made a reaction video because he cut all the cuts on the thing wrong, or not all of them, but like instead of it looking 3D, it looked like some weird thing. And I did a reaction, and in it, I'm just cracking up. It was cruel if you think about it, but
Mhm.
in the right spirit of like of love and stuff. And I always remember that punk. Anyways, whatever. That's a sidebar.
Well, so but the Kinks were credited as being the first to use amplified distortion, but that doesn't mean it's heavy metal. And let's get over here for a second, take a slight detour. Um, David is in the hospital waiting to have a heart catheter put in the morning. And prayers to you, brother. It's wow. Don't know what to say other than
They do that. They do that.
man.
It's nerve wracking, but they do that all the time. I'm confident that everything will be all right. Well,
Yeah.
we'll pray for you,
Mhm.
and nothing as soon as you can, hit us up and reach out. You know,
Yeah.
if you can, just to say hey.
Serious. Serious. Here's hoping everything goes well.
Yeah, it'll go well.
Yep. Pulling for you, man. Yeah, Jamie, now that I've started an argument, I need to get to bed. Sorry, guys, I'm wiped out later. Yeah, well, see, Jamie, it's already tomorrow for Jamie. He's 8 hours ahead of me. So it's 4 in the morning, or a little after 4 in the morning to him. So I can see him splitting. Oh, man. Well, let's see here. Okay, that kind of got me out of that wanting to see if I could start a fight thing. But so now that I do like this quote here. Um, what were they called? Here, where'd it go? Where'd it go? Um, First heavy metal acts are considered to be Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Deep Purple, often referred to as the Unholy Trinity. I've never heard them called that. Um, I This was back in the day. Okay,
And that is a good point about Led Zeppelin, by the way.
mhm. This was the. I'm going to say back in the day, we didn't consider we considered Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple hard rock. They weren't acid rock. Jimi Hendrix was acid rock. Um, King Crimson was acid rock because they did things with panning to freak out the people who were dropping acid. They had all kinds of strange sounds that they would just throw in there for no other reason than to just mess with people's heads. That was acid rock. But hard rock was the immigrant song. That was hard rock.
Dan, daga, 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 dan, daga, 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 dan, daga, daga,
Exactly.
dan. Yeah.
And Zeppelin was not, to me anyway, still isn't a metal band.
No,
It's a hard rock band.
but if you were to stick, okay, so let's go with Jim. What Jim said.
Okay.
Those three different those three bands that are often credited as.
The Unholy Trinity, yes.
If you take those three bands,
Hmm.
the one that, in my opinion, that has overlapped the the title definition of heavy metal
Hmm.
would be Black Sabbath,
Exactly.
because if you think of, even though the three are heavy,
Hmm.
if you think of Led Zeppelin, they're now considered a classic rock. Yes, they're hard rock,
Hmm.
um, but only Black Sabbath has progressed even from the begin. Everything became Black Sabbath. Let's put it that way.
Well, at that time, Black Sabbath was considered deeper, darker.
let me correct. Let me correct. Everything. My argument is that everything. So if you think of Led Zeppelin,
Hmm.
um, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath
Hmm.
in the beginning,
Right.
and you take them across the what you call the decades,
Hmm.
if the only one, this is my argument, the only one that everybody coalesced into, that also call themselves heavy metal or or yeah, heavy metal or whatnot, or this or that, all coalesced around the themes of Black Sabbath. In other words, let me just tie it. Let me tie the bow down. If you think of Iron Maiden, if you
Hmm.
think of Metallica, if you think of
Right.
all the heavy metal people, they
Right.
refer to a combination stylistically and
Hmm.
vocally what Black Sabbath was doing, not what the Led Zeppelins or Deep Purples were doing.
And that's where I was going with that. That's what I meant when I said, even at the time, Black Sabbath was seen as heavier, darker, gloomier. There's something not right there, you know.
Mhm.
The name heavy metal or metal hadn't been used yet. It hadn't been infused into the lexicon. It
All right.
wasn't there yet.
First time it was used, the word.
Was in Born to Be Wild, Steppenwolf. But it wasn't applied to music. That was in reference to the motorcycles in Born to Be Wild. Remember where that song came from.
That's right.
So, anyway, by the time it applied to music, Black Sabbath was the poster child. That is heavy metal.
Mhm.
The other bands, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, were not going in that direction.
No, I mean
So
they weren't taking all the bits that
they were
the
still hard rock, but they weren't going that deeper, darker direction.
they weren't. I just want to say that the reason it ended up, to me, looking like um, Black Sabbath are the heavy metal ones,
Mhm.
is that everybody universally, well, not universally, but you know what I mean. It was
Mhm.
pretty ubiquitously converging with the themes of Black Sabbath, not the themes broadly, like in general,
Mhm.
of your Led Zeppelins or your Deep Purples. They were more Deep Purple than Led Zeppelin. If you think of
Mhm.
heavy metal across time, they are directing themselves more and more towards a Black Sabbath way of dressing the music as opposed to a Led Zeppelin. Think
Maybe
of all the hair.
later, maybe real late, but yeah.
What do you mean? I'm
I'm
thinking
talking
about.
about I'm talking about in Deep Purple's progression. They never went. They never really went the same direction that Sabbath went.
No, no, no. I'm saying if you take Led Zeppelin,
Hmm.
which is, it's hard to, because these people are their own unique thing. But like, let's say
Yeah.
using Jim's
Hmm.
trifecta of whatnot. If you take Led Zeppelin and if you take Deep Purple, and then you have your um, Black Sabbath,
Hmm.
and you push them across the decades, like imagine you're sliding them up towards the decades, and looking at all the rock bands that are joining them along the way, the heavy metal signature starts to coalesce around Black Sabbath, because
Yeah.
those bands are using horror themes. Not
Yeah.
all of them, but they're kind of going in that direction. And the guitar styling is being copied. Tony Iommi guitar style is being referenced in guitar licks more.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, but in combination, heavy metal per se has surrounded itself with. I would point to Black Sabbath.
Yeah. Yeah. It,
That's my argument.
you just about have to. You just about have to. Um,
Yes, Led Zeppelin. Jim just said heck. Jim just said heck.
wow.
Jim's out on the farm. Well, he literally is, because he's out in the middle of nowhere. He said heck. Zeppelin 3 had a lot of acoustic guitars. Yes, I've
Yes, it
heard
did.
it. I've heard it said. I don't have no need to doubt it, but it could be right, it could be wrong. I think it's true that they're 50-50 mix of acoustic and electric guitar. Throughout all their albums, they have
Well,
plenty of acoustic
but
freaking stuff.
and a lot of blues in there too. A lot of blues. I mean, if it keeps on raining, the levee's gonna break. You don't get much more blues than that. So yeah, you would have to say that Sabbath was the one. You know, you could, I don't know, the whole acoustic guitar thing. I don't think defines a band because Sabbath played some acoustic stuff as well. I mean, you look at Fluff.
Yeah,
There
but
was
that's
some,
so.
but they played some acoustic stuff as well. But again, it's attitude, I think, with the music. Led Zeppelin was just there to be a hard rockin', hard driving band, you know, kind of like ACDC. And that's why, I don't know, maybe that's why I have such an affection for ACDC, was because that's what they were too, a hard driving, rocking band,
So
you know?
if you think of so AC/DC aligns more with the heavy metal of the Black Sabbath, even though they're their own unique special thing. But they align
One or
more
two
with Black
songs.
Sabbath than they do with Led Zeppelin, because Led Zeppelin is a tapestry of different colors, and heavy metal has this theme that sticks with, not all the time, but a lot of the time, with this dark, brooding horror thing. Now, you can argue that Led Zeppelin has dark brooding, but Led Zeppelin is coming from a psychedelic
Yeah,
world,
yeah.
whereas you can argue that Black
Well,
Sabbath is also psychedelic, but there's a darkness in there.
right. And that's what that was my whole point with that at the very beginning of this. Led Zeppelin was also an inspirational band in that there was a lot of mysticism around it. Robert Plant was very hot and heavy into Norse mythology.
Yes.
And there was a lot of that mysticism in there.
You know what we sound like?
Hmm.
But for rock and roll, we sound like these dinner parties in
The old
very
art critics, yes. Oh, he had a wonderful use of light, you know.
because we're really honing in
Two
and
old
tearing
men, get off my lawn.
we're, we're, we're really tearing apart the little bits, and but
Yeah,
it's
these
true
kids
though.
today with their hair in their clothes and the music is just noise.
No, but it's worth analyzing, at least to me. But it's true though, because we're really um
Well, I think all in all, we're both more or less saying the same thing here. And that's is what made Black Sabbath so different from the
hey,
other rock bands of
who
the
do you
time.
want? Your choice, your choice. Who do you you want to be, Roger or Ebert? Come on, your choice,
I
your
don't know.
choice.
I thought it was beauty. I'll give it two thumbs up. What do you think, Doug?
So okay, um, just to like sort of like tie it all into, because that was a good one that Jim threw at us.
Mhm.
Um, I'm gonna stick with Black Sabbath, but not to disparage by any stretch of the imagination. Now I sound like
Mhm.
one of those Chris. The other two bands, because they're freaking fantastic, and there's so much that came out of the music from the '60s and so on, and to the '70s and '80s. It's just so you can't really throw the baby out with the
Well,
chocolate mousse puree.
but you're comparing apples to oranges because they were different bands with different messages and different styles. So, I can get just as much into Deep Purple as I can get into early Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. That just depends on my mood. So but they are different bands with different styles and different messages, and that has to be said.
Okay, let's sort of head in the winding down, but I'm going to ask you a
Yeah.
series of questions.
Okay. I'll answer to the best of my ability. Am I on the clock?
I saw I saw this. I just said that and it remind. I saw this video clip. The Facebook drag finger along to
Mhm.
get to the next one thing.
I do
Um,
YouTube shorts. You go vertically, but go ahead.
oh, okay. Well, I can do both, but I was just on and so in one clip, there's two guys there and a group of people there in some sort of hall,
Mhm.
and the one guy you can't see him. He's like the camera's behind him, but you see the one standing in front of the camera, and the guy says, "Do you like knock knock jokes?" And the guy facing the camera says, "I mean, I guess." And he says, "Okay, knock knock." And he says, "Who's there?" And the guy slaps the living crap out of him, and he says, "We should ask the questions." And with some German joke thing.
We ask the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, have you seen that one?
Yes.
Dude, I just peed my pants, dude, because the guy just stood there after he got slapped the crap out of, and he couldn't do anything because it was like perfection in a bottle. You saw it. You saw it too.
Yeah.
It was freaking hilarious, dude. We even asked the questions. Whack. Oh no, he said, "Have you ever heard of German?" No, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Have you ever heard of German knock knock joke?
Okay. No, I'm not. I didn't hear. I don't remember that part. I
Yeah,
must
yeah,
have been
yeah.
a different one.
No,
Must have
no,
been a
yeah.
different video.
Well, if I run across it again, but whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm gonna ask you a series of questions, but
Get on with
but,
it,
but look,
baby.
but look, but look, the screen isn't. We're virtual, so we can. Um, it just popped into my head when I said
Yeah.
that. I'm gonna ask favorite of,
Okay.
and whatever you say, it doesn't have to. You're not official. You're not invested in it. Um, favorite Led Zeppelin album.
That's a hard one. I love Zeppelin 2, but I
Me too.
like Zeppelin 4.
No, no, I'll
That's a
stick with
hard
two.
one.
No, but I will stick with two. I think you're right on that one. It's got the drum solo, Moby Dick,
Hmm.
and it's got all the good ones. Just that one.
That's a hard one for me.
I like. Okay, so favorite Beatles album.
Abbey Road, but I like Rubber
Favorite
Soul too.
Abbey Road's your favorite. I like
Yeah.
Abbey Road a lot. I like Rubber Soul. Those are the two that I float around because I like both of them. So I'm with you on that one. But if I had to choose Abbey, it's a tough one.
And sometimes Sergeant Pepper creeps in there too. It just depends.
Yeah, but I'm saying you have to stick to one. Choose one.
Abbey Road.
Okay. Um, favorite Dionne Warwick song.
Do you know the way to San Jose?
Great song.
Mhm.
Favorite TV show sitcom ever.
Of all time,
If you had to pick one for now.
Barney Miller.
Interesting. Um, Coke, Pepsi, or some other soft drink.
Pepsi.
Really?
Hmm.
That is shockingly upsetting.
Coke is too sweet for me.
That I say it the other way around. Pepsi's too sweet. Pepsi's too sweet.
Different strokes for different folks.
Okay. Chicken or beef?
Beef.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Forget it. Surf or turf?
Uh-huh.
Surf or turf? Fish, or meats, beef and stuff.
Meats.
Okay.
But then again, I have to qualify that because I think I'm an inland kid. I've never been raised on the coast, so seafood is expensive. So I consider seafood a treat. But if I had my choice on a daily basis, I like a little bit of variety. So I would go with meats.
I agree with you. I like variety as well. But hell, there's a lot of fish. There's a lot of fish in the sea. There's plenty of variety.
And they taste pretty much the same. There's some differences, but not much.
Dude, I'm more of a fish well, actually I can't say that, but fish. I would go with fish in this
Okay.
situation. Because you got your shrimps, you got your
Yeah.
lobsters, your crustaceans galore. In any event, so that was the surf and turf. Um, coffee or tea?
Coffee, 100%.
Morning person, evening person?
Well, it's evening. Here I am. It's funny. The older I get, the earlier I wake up in the morning. That doesn't mean I like it. I would prefer to stay up late, but it doesn't work out. But
Movies, horror, action, drama. Um, which genre?
comedy.
Comedy.
Mhm.
Okay. Broadly speaking, favorite 60s or 70s?
Favorite what in the 60s or 70s?
Broadly, the decade.
Broadly, the decade. If I had to choose between the two, I'd say 60s. If you're asking for
That's
my favorite decade, 50s.
okay. Well, I kind of like those three, and each have a good, especially in the context of what we were talking about music, because all three have good stuff. Um, Pants or shorts?
How cold is it?
That's the good. That's a good answer because that is a just
Oh, okay. To answer your question, I'll say yes, please. One or the other. If it's 100 degrees outside, I'm in shorts. If it's 60 degrees, long pants.
okay. Now we're gonna get a little bit wilder. Not
That
wilder,
wasn't
but
wild. Okay.
we'll start. We'll start. East Coast or West Coast, America, U.S.
Having spent time on both, I'll stick with the West.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, more specific. And you may not have been in all these places,
Mhm.
nor I, in some of these, but just throwing it out from popular knowledge what that we have. New York or Chicago or Illinois. I don't know if you've ever been in either place.
Um, I've been to both very limited. Neither. If I had to choose, if hard pressed, I would say New York.
Okay, I've been to both limited, like yourself, maybe for a week or two stretch.
It wasn't even that long for me. It was like 2 days.
But I was at upstate New York. So upstate New York,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
it's kind of like the country.
Hmm.
So
Well, it
you're
is
kind
the
of,
country. Yeah.
well, yeah, it's not even kind of like it's just the country.
Hmm.
North Carolina, South Carolina, or
Yes, please. I like them both. I really do. I like them both. They both have their different states, different cultures within those states, but I like them both. Um, I don't know that I could pick one over the other.
okay, tacos or what's the other one? What's the one that see? Because I'm not a West Coast. There's the tacos, and then they have the
Burritos?
the burritos. Tacos or burritos?
Yes, please. Tacos.
Soft or hard?
Soft.
I'm with you 100%, dude. I didn't know that
Well,
soft tacos existed until I went West Coast.
um, that's American. That's Tex-Mex. You go to Mexico, you go to a Mexican restaurant, you won't get crunchy tacos.
It's soft. It's soft tacos, and
They're
those are
they're
bad.
they're corn tortillas, but they're heated up on the comal and two tortillas per taco, two tortillas, and just chow down.
Soups or stews?
Stews,
Good.
yeah. Soup to me, soup is like there are two things I called soup. Soup is it's an appetizer. It's like okay, there's more coming. It's a side maybe. But soup is also what's left over in the bottom of the dishwasher after you clean up after a good meal.
Stews is a meal.
Yes.
I
Yes,
agree.
and the thicker the stew, the better. If I can take a breadstick and stand it up in the clam chowder, you did it right.
Whole wheat bread or the regular stuff?
You mean white bread?
White bread.
I haven't had plain old white bread Oh my God. Probably 30 years. I haven't had plain old white bread. It's just, to me, it's just mush. It's paste. So I'll say whole wheat.
Whole wheat.
Hmm.
Um, Kentucky. You have to choose from Kentucky Fried Chicken or Long John Silver's.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Although I like, well, let me not even think in terms of fast food, but okay, I would
No,
have picked
come
Long
on,
John.
come on, come on. Yeah,
I would have
okay.
picked, yeah, Long John Silver's because Long John. I love the coating of the breaded fish is
Mhm.
so, and when you dip it into the, it's just incredible. Um, okay, France or Germany,
Germany.
England, Wales or Scotland.
Ooh, that's tough. I've not been to any of them. I would have to go Scotland, but only because I have personal reasons for that. And that is, I need to trace some ancestry.
Atlantic or Pacific Ocean.
Pacific.
Wow. Well, you would. I mean, the
Come on.
Atlantic is so much warmer.
Depends on where you go.
No, I don't know. Really,
Yeah. Go to Hawaii.
the water's warm there.
Yeah. The currents are not running from Alaska. The currents are running from the south.
Okay. Fender or Gibson.
Oh, Fenders are easier to work on. Fender.
Okay. DeWalt or Makita.
Neither. I'm a Milwaukee dude.
Oh, okay. You see, Jim said, well, Jim's all over the place. He's throwing. Everybody likes tacos. It appears.
Yeah. Taco, taco, taco. Yeah, that's Steve. He's got it. Street tacos. That two corn tortillas per taco, and they're nice and soft and nice and warm. The whole thing's nice and warm. None of this crunchy stuff. Taco stuff with street does not sound good. No, you're right. They're street tacos, man. Street.
Um, I guess uh, drive it home with a few. The American South or the American Northeast? Just a
South.
broad
South.
American South.
Mhm.
Okay.
South. Yeah, I do miss the South in a lot of ways. Some of the best food you'll ever have. Some of the friendliest people you'll ever meet. So I do have a soft spot for the South. Y'all can have the humidity, y'all can have the bugs, but the people and the food, I don't think you can beat it.
The Lone Ranger TV series or Bonanza TV series? Let me
I
correct it.
didn't
Let me
I
correct it.
didn't watch either one, so I'd say Batman.
I was going to correct it with Gunsmoke or
I
the
didn't watch that one either.
you never even saw reruns?
Oh, I saw a couple of them, but I wasn't really interested. I'm not a Western kind of guy.
Um, well, Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello?
Laurel and Hardy.
Unbelievable.
Totally believable.
um, well, heck, the Three Stooges or what was this guy's name? The British guy with the mustachio,
Charlie Chaplin?
or Charlie Chaplin.
Two completely different things. You can't compare them. I like them all.
But if you had to pick one and say, oh well, I enjoy this for
Probably the Three Stooges because there were more Three Stooges shorts than there were Chaplin movies.
favorite Abbott and Costello movie
Ooh.
or memorable one.
Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay. Do you remember the one with the mummy?
That was, well, I think the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein had a mummy in it, but I may be wrong.
But there was one specific where they go.
Yeah, but I don't remember which one it was.
Well, it all.
I was more into Bob Hope and Bing Crosby movies by that time, the Road 2 series, and Martin and Lewis back in that era as well, than I
Um.
was into Abbott and Costello.
Well, they had one with the werewolf. They had one.
Mhm.
Remember, they
Yeah.
had one with the Invisible Man. Like,
The Invisible Man came in at the very end of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But yeah.
was it the same one? No, there was one that was just specific
Well,
to each
Abbott and
character.
Costello Meet Frankenstein had the werewolf in it. It had Dracula in it. It had the Frankenstein's monster in it, and the Invisible Man made a brief appearance at the end.
Didn't but didn't they have one? Because I remember one where the
There
guy
may
was
have been one with the Invisible Man, yeah, because they
yeah, I
did a
think
series of the horror monsters at the time.
yeah, I think so. I think that there was a series of them.
But
Um,
Greg's got the right idea here. The Marx Brothers were my favorite, absolute favorite.
yeah, Marx Brothers or the Three Stooges would have been a better
The Marx
comparison.
Brothers could be slapstick when they wanted to be, but they were more verbal humor, and it
Mhm.
came at you like a machine gun.
But they were three, right?
Yeah.
You had the guy with
And
the
well, there
mustache,
was
which
actually
was
there was actually
Groucho.
5, but 4 of them transitioned into film, and then Zeppo left, and you ended up with Groucho, Harpo, and Chico. So they were the main 3.
Yeah,
But I liked it because it just came at you like a machine gun, and if you missed one joke, don't worry, there's another right around the corner. And it was sometimes made you think stuff, and other times it was just oddball, goofy, holy crap, did he really say that kind of humor. So it was all over the place.
last one. This one is a triple. Trains, planes, or automobiles.
Great movie, by the way. Automobiles. My flying days are over. I've been on a train a couple times. It was kind of cool, but I prefer to be in control. Thank you so much. If if I'm going to get killed in an accident, I'd like to have the wheel in my hands, and try to avoid it. Because if I'm in a plane or on a train, you're along for the ride.
Yeah. All right. Well, that puts things into perspective. I agreed with
Yeah.
much of it. Some of the ones like the Pepsi one I can't understand, but
It's just it. That's what makes the world go round, man. If we were all the same, we wouldn't have any choices, would we?
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the case,
Now,
right?
when I was growing up, it was neither Coke nor Pepsi. It was RC Cola and a moon pie.
Well, you had Coke in your era.
We had Coke in our era for
My
sure,
dad had Coke.
but we'd walk past an aisle full of Coke to get to an RC, Royal Crown Cola,
Oh, okay.
and then go grab a moon pie.
Okay. Well, I think that we covered a nice little chunk of choices there.
Mm-hmm.
Broad choices.
Mm-hmm.
Rain, sleet, or snow. Yeah. Pick one quick. Which one?
Neither. I like my sunny, warm weather.
All right. All right. So should we land this?
Let's go ahead and land it.
Okay. Well, we go live every Tuesday at 9, except for today because we had a little change up.
Mm-hmm.
We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast, and this is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. We talk a little bit about everything. We have a site over on Facebook by the same name, as well as a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and we're sponsored by.
Jump, click buttons. I'm pressing madly. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. But the man behind the curtain you need to pay attention to is Steve over here at Harneo Media, because he's going to take care of your website issues. Very, very competitively priced, 100% personalized service. And when you deal with Harneal Media, you deal with Steve. You're not dealing with some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere who doesn't give a sniff about you and you'll never talk to again. That alone is worth the price of admission. So do yourself a favor, get over there and check it out. There's a link to Harneal Media in every video you'll find on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL Media.com, sponsor of Trampled Foot, or Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com.
All right. Well, we we're gonna take off, but we want to thank you guys for joining us today. We we're praying for you, Portal, and we wish you well. We hope that you give us a buzz or a message when you get an opportunity. But we're thinking of you, and all will go well, guaranteed. There's the Creator above, and He protects us. So that's just my thoughts. And everyone, be good, enjoy the things that you do, and we'll catch you next week, same channel, and peace.
Please. That way.